Hi, my name is Rajiv. In this video, we are going to discuss about the reading techniques and uh, whenever you go for any standardized tests such as IELTS, TOEFL, PT, SAT, PreSAT, reading is an invariable part of all these tests, and you're supposed to read a passage and answer questions based on that passage. This is also called as unseen passage, and many of the academic classes also have this as a component of their evaluation. So having a very strong hand on reading comprehension is very, very important from the perspective of um, preparing for these tests and of course for academic success also. So in this session, we are going to discuss some very important techniques of reading, and we will also do some exercises after this session. So the purpose of this particular session is to discuss about the techniques only. And yeah, to begin with, I would like to tell about uh, the goals of reading and how you should approach it. So one very important time about or one very important fact about reading comprehension is that you are supposed to do the questions within the given time span. So there is a limited time span in which you are supposed to do the questions, and the number of correct answers you get eventually decides your scores. So if you try to be very fast, you know, you sacrifice on precision. So this goes wrong. So you get maybe some questions wrong because you go fast. But if you try to go slow, you know, you might get the questions correct, but you would not be able to complete all the questions. Let us say, for example, if I talk about SAT, you're supposed to go to 52 questions in 65 minutes. I talk about IELTS, you are supposed to do 40 questions in 60 minutes. So different tests have different number of questions to be done in the given time span, and roughly if you look at this, somewhere around 1 minute per question is the time you get in which you are supposed to read the passage and answer questions. So essentially, there are two goals. You are supposed to be fast and you are supposed to be correct also. But the moment you try to be too fast, you sacrifice on being correct. The moment you try to spend too much time, you end up not completing all the questions together. So, what should you do? Should we focus on time? Should we focus on being right? What should we do and how should we go about it? My suggestion to you is to first focus on being right, get the correct answers, so that you get to understand their language. The questions are asked in a certain way. So, when you understand the language of questions, when you understand the type of passages that come in the test, when you get acquainted with the test structure, you automatically get fast. It's like when you learn driving for the first time, it is advisable to drive slowly so that you do not uh, uh, so that you avoid an accident, you do not meet an accident. So here also, instead of focusing too much on speed, it is better to focus on being precise and correct so that you do not get incorrect answers, and eventually you develop speed. Speed is always an eventuality. It is a function of doing the same thing again and again. This is about everything. Just think about how you started writing. So a small child who is in third or fourth class or maybe second class, you would see that he makes each character with lots of efforts. But then eventually he starts writing fast. So speed is a function of doing something again and again repeatedly for a given time span. Similarly, in reading also, it is very much possible to develop speed, but you'll have to have patience. You'll have to go through multiple passages of different types so that you understand the framework of reading. You understand how different types of passages are organized. You understand how does a science passage unfold, how does a narrative unfold. Like we're going to go through these one by one, but then I can just give you a glimpse of it. So there are narrative passages where there is a story told and there is a different way of dealing with those kind of passages. There are science based passages, there are humanities based passages, and we are going to have some techniques for dealing with all these different types. So essentially what I'm trying to say is, first precision, then speed. As of now, when you are starting your journey in reading comprehension, it is very important to go slow. But of course, we will try to learn some techniques and we'll try to implement them. So basically, I don't want to force any technique, but then we will just, so let's just take them as some best practices of reading. The first is STOP. Now, what does this STOP mean? So when you read a passage, what do you read? What do you want to focus on? Do you want to focus on all the minor details? Do you want to read everything which is given in the passage? Or you want to have an outline of the passage first? My suggestion to you would be to have an outline of the passage first. And for that purpose, this STOP comes very handy. STOP stands for scope, tone, organization, and purpose. So when you use this technique, you get to understand the passage in terms of what is its scope. So scope means whether it belongs to science, or it's a personal story, or it is something from sociology. What is the scope of it, and what exactly is the basic domain? The tone, whether it is very academic, very direct, or very emotive, or it is full of imagery. So what kind of tone is used? Because many a questions would be clear if you understand the tone of the passage. How is it organized? Organization means what is the meaning of each paragraph? So what is the transition happening from this paragraph to this paragraph? How was an introduction there? How was the first paragraph, the second paragraph, and how does the story unfold in these? So that's about the organization of the passage. And the last thing that you're going to do is purpose. So scope, tone, organization, purpose. Purpose is, what is the main agenda? Is there something in the writer's mind? Is he trying to talk about certain phenomena if it is a science-based passage? Is he trying to say that, okay, this was an unknown mystery, this was the experiment, and this was the result? So the purpose was to tell about this sequence of events. Or this particular scientist is trying to come with an counter argument to some established theory. So the purpose is to present certain counter arguments or counter evidences to disprove an already established theory. So what is the purpose? Scope is from which domain it is. Tone, whether it is very academic or very philosophical, direct, indirect, very commanding, very subtle and respectful. What kind of tone is it using? How is it organized? Is what is the meaning of every paragraph? You can also write the headings for each of the paragraphs. And then what is the purpose? So scope, tone, organization, and purpose. When you read the passage for the first time, try to understand what is its scope, what is its tone, how is it organized, and what is its purpose. You can also read some of the questions from the passage to understand what is the scope and tone, because the kind of questions asked there would also give you a little idea of what would unfold and what is important in the passage. But don't try to remember anything. The difference between a reading comprehension test and academic test is this, that in an academic test you are supposed to remember everything and you have to rely on memory, whereas in a reading comprehension test it is more about comprehending, analyzing, and answering questions. You don't have to remember anything. You can always make notes. So it is advisable to stop after every paragraph and write down headings there so that you understand it very properly. One more technique which is very handy and which is useful is to read the first para and the last para first. It really works because your mind actually works like a Google map. If it knows from here it starts and here it ends, it can generate and anticipate the events in between. Let's say at the beginning they discuss about some unknown problem or something about which they are not very clear. Like for example, what was the genesis of Earth? How Earth came into existence? Some people say that there was one bang. Some people say there were two bangs. Some people say there were three bangs. So the initial paragraph gives you a sense of unknown problem, how Earth came into existence. And at the end, if they say that, okay, this was 3,500 million years ago when this bang occurred, and in between there are lots of other theories, you can connect these two dots. The first paragraph talked about an unknown problem or a mystery, and the last paragraph is giving a solution. In between, they would definitely talk about various experiments related to this problem, which is like how did Earth came into existence. The problem could be anything, and you would find lots and lots of different types of science-based passages or history-based passages. All I'm trying to say is, if you read the first paragraph and the last paragraph, it would be similar to, we can have an analogy, like the way, if you just watch the first 5 minutes of a movie and the last 5 minutes of a movie, your brain would be able to generate the sequence of what would transpire through different phases of the story. This is super important and a very interesting technique. Read the first paragraph and the last paragraph first. I'm not saying you won't have to read the rest of the paragraphs. You will definitely have to read those paragraphs, but then understanding the whole passage would be much more easier if you already know the beginning and the end of the whole conversation. So do this. Sometimes when the passage is easy, when you read the first and the last para and you find that, oh, I'm fine with it, you can straight away go to the questions. So you would be saving a lot of time. Rather than reading 80 lines, you have read, let's say, just 20 lines, and now you are at the questions. And while doing the questions, you can go back to the passage to look for that particular part of the passage where that context is there. So now it's a very different thing. You are not reading the passage individually, you are reading the passage with reference to some question. And that's how you can save your time. So this is a very important technique where we call first para, last para. Rather than reading the whole passage, you would be focusing on the first paragraph and the last paragraph first. Try to make the story on your own. Do not focus on the minor details. Focus on what is the scope, tone, organization, and purpose, and straight away go to the questions. So this will help you to read faster. But then, in case you want to have a hand-on reading, you want to start your journey of reading, I would not like you to be really fast. Your purpose is to comprehend the content, and it's only after doing at least 20 passages that you can expect to develop your speed. So practice is the key here. You have to practice and do lots and lots of different types of passages so you get acquainted to the structure of the test, and you have certain framework in your mind to deal with the passages. If I have to draw an analogy between a reading passage and a maths question, so when you get a maths question, the moment you see it, you get to understand, okay, this is related to linear equation, this is related to quadratic equation, this is the equation of a circle, this is something related to a word problem, direct proportion, inverse proportion, triangle, circle, whatever it is. So the moment you look at a question, a formula strikes your mind and you know that, okay, this is how you're supposed to go about it. Somehow you derive a structure, a step-by-step process to get to the answer from the question, isn't it? Similarly, when you read a passage, if you are able to classify it in a certain category, that this is a science-based passage. So in a science-based passage, this would be a typical structure. There would be an unknown problem. They would have an experimental setup. Then there would be some results, and based on the results, they will do something. If you can categorize the passage, it would be very easy for you to answer the questions. And the good part of the story is the passages in SAT or in IELTS or any other test, they are from certain categories. The first passage is, let's say, some personal history. The second passage is based on certain scientific phenomenon. The third passage, so like that. If you can classify the passage, you would be able to answer the passage very easily. So yeah, and this first para, last para technique is super important. Yeah, every paragraph is usually organized in TEE format, where TEE stands for theme, example, explanation. So whenever you read a paragraph, try to understand what is the theme. So the first line is usually the theme of every paragraph. See, there is a difference between paragraph and a passage. This is the whole passage. and this passage is divided into multiple paragraphs. So I'm talking about a paragraph. So whenever you read a paragraph, try to identify what is the theme here. So is he trying to say that, okay, uh, the purpose was to find out how, why birds fly in V formation. So they did some experiments here and they found a conclusion. So the theme is why birds fly in V formation. Then they are giving some examples or some experimentation and a conclusion. So what is the theme of the paragraph is to be identified, and you should be able to differentiate it with an example and the explanation. When we see some examples after this session, you would be able to identify, and when we study some paragraphs together, we will have some examples, and I think that would be the right place to discuss about this in detail. But yes, whenever you read a paragraph, try to identify what is the theme. Theme is the most important thing. If you identify the theme, the examples and explanations will fall into place. So try to identify what is the theme. Then when you read every paragraph, you can create some milestones and headings. So after reading every paragraph, you can write down maybe a 5 words to 10 words summary of what it is. Talks about, introduces different types of words, talks about a setup of a new shop where the inauguration function is held, or shop inauguration function, you can write like that. So writing a few headings or milestones makes a lot of sense, because when you reread the passage, you don't have to read the whole paragraph. You would be just reading your headings, and that will give you a chance to 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 save your time later. Transitions and signpost words, these are also very important. The way you drive a car on the road and you look at signposts, you have to look at some signpost words while reading also. There are some words which are very important because they tell the direction of reading. Like, for example, if there are words such as however or but or nevertheless, you can identify that there is some kind of contradiction happening here. Whatever was said here, this is a U-turn. That's where we use however, but, or nevertheless. Similarly, if there are words such as further or furthermore or moreover, these are the words which say that there is an extension of idea or expansion of idea happening here, right? So similarly, if you have got the word such as consequently, so this word very clearly says that as a consequence of something which happened earlier, this thing happened. So you have to focus on the transition and signpost words. These words tell you the direction of the passage, and you would be able to move faster. So you can circle them while doing the passage and know that this is the transition happening at that place. And as I told you earlier, every passage has a different structure. So if it's a science-based passage, there would be some unknown problem, some experiment, some conclusion. If it's a narrative type of passage, there would be some story and there would be characters. There would be some interplay between the characters, and sometimes it is based on some kind of philosophy, some human value. So these are some characteristics of some people. So yeah, you have to identify those in case it's the narrative type of passage where they are relating a story. In a history-based passage, again, they talk about some social problem, like for example, dowry, or they talk about apartheid, uh, empowerment of women, so enfranchisement rights, abolition movement. So something, some problem which existed in some phase of history. What happened then? There could be two people giving different opinions, and then there will be a conclusion. Similarly, in a sociology-based passage, also they might talk about, let's say, impact of internet on our memory. We are going to do this passage in a short while. So basically, uh, yeah, if you are able to classify the passage into certain branch of knowledge, it becomes easy to apply a certain structure or format to it. For example, I've said this many times, a science based passage is usually structured this way. They identify a problem, They set up an experiment. Based on the experiment, there are certain results. Based on results, there are certain actions. So problem, experiment, result, action. That's how a science-based passage is. The moment you see it's a science-based passage, you can start thinking in terms of what is the problem, what is the experiment, what is the result, what is the action. So in case you can classify the passage, it becomes easy for you to read, and you can derive, or you can, based on the type of passage, you can adopt a certain reading style. Should you go straight to the questions, and with reference to questions, you should read the passage, or you should read the passage first to get the basic idea and then answer questions. This you would be able to decide based on the nature of the passage. So this is very, very important. Thank you so much. So these are a few techniques, and in the next few sessions we are going to discuss some examples of reading, and when we apply these techniques, we would be able to reinforce them, and we will be able to see how we can read faster and get the answers quickly.